All right, questions. We got a couple questions in. First one, we use archive space. However, I'm working with a consortium of other repositories to determine if we can create a portal that can do two things. One, harvest and or host copies of archival collections data from repositories with their own platforms. And two, host archival collections data for smaller repositories that don't have their own platform and for whom obtaining and managing their own platform would be both cost prohibitive and or too high a technical curve for what they can manage. And in parentheses, especially as loan arrangers who do not have a high comfort level working with computers in general. 100%. That is definitely true, especially for, at least I'm based out in the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of small but mighty organizations that have a great team of volunteers, but they don't necessarily have the budget or interest to get their own CMS. So yes, part of this is thinking about the consortium piece. So thinking about a collections management system as a software, but perhaps also as a process is something to think about. So I want to shift us to the answer as we walk through this. The California Libraries has a great collaborative consortium portal. I'm less familiar with the nuts and bolts on Online California, but I do know a bit more about the process for Northwest Digital Heritage, which is the link and example we've got here. For Northwest Digital Heritage, they do offer those two different ways to contribute that our questioner posed. So they do a harvest mechanism using Open Archives Initiative, the OAI PMH, for metadata harvesting. So their first option is, okay, other archive, you've already got things in archive space, we're going to take these things, or a Mecca or whatever, we're just going to harvest them with our tool and then put them in this digital heritage consortium. The second way they do it is the second part that the questionnaire suggested, which is the particular institution, for whatever various reason, doesn't have its own collections management system. And so there's not a place to go and do that harvesting, at least not online. And so having a secondary way to contribute, in this case via spreadsheet, is another perfectly acceptable mechanism. So for Northwest Digital Heritage, they will take contributions via a CSV, JSON, or XML file. So meeting the two criteria that our questioner asked about. I will note here that the process and the tools being used for the consortia piece is not predicated necessarily on the collections management system. For example, it's not the collections management system that's doing the harvesting, it's connected to the harvester, which is an important technical point, I think, in terms of when you're shopping for a CMS, at least there's not a CMS that I'm aware of where that is just like a normal part of functionality where it's going to take things out of other CMSs and put it in its own. Maybe we'll eventually get there though. But it is normal to have some sort of API, some sort of harvesting tool or function that can connect one or two or multiple, one to many in many of these cases, for that harvesting piece. So I do want to differentiate, because this is not necessarily a CMS product question, in terms of the CMS won't have this functionality specifically. Other notes I want to make, many of these consortium pages, are not just pages, but databases, they tend to also be representative of DPLA hubs. DPLA is Digital Public Libraries of America, and for the Northwest Digital Heritage, not only do they gather and provide this consortia type portal here at this particular website, but they then also will contribute that data and digital content to DPLA. So they're serving as a DPLA hub, to use their lingo. So something to be aware of, because that's an option. The important parts here, and again, back to process and not necessarily specific to the collections management system, but there needs to be agreed upon best practices. I am familiar with Northwest Digital Heritage in terms of the data requirements, the quality of the data, how they're using specific fields, the format of the data in those fields. Those are dictated out of necessity, not just for consistency of data, increasing discovery and use efficacy, but also just being able to harvest and or gather and incorporate it into their system. The data needs to be in a particular way. And some of the consortia areas can offer support and training. It sort of depends on the particular service, on the resources they may have. Many of them start out grant funded, but then have to shift to like a maintenance mode at a particular institution. And sometimes that transition can be a bit rough because support becomes a little bit more anemic. But do be aware, especially for smaller organizations, like Northwest Digital Heritage has some great documentation for institutions that are thinking about being contributors and how they can do that. So very supportive in terms of exploring that more, outlining the process. So this may be a great example to check out in terms of the difference being, it's not necessarily about the CMS product you choose, but it's about the tools and functionality outside of it in addition to the process. Next question, what level of control does the database administrator have over individual user accounts in terms of permissions and data entry oversight? Specifically, can the administrator customize access to certain features or restrict editing capabilities to ensure data integrity across the collection? So asterisk, it depends. Many collections management systems, especially the more proprietary ones, this is becoming such a commonplace ability, at least in terms of being able to establish user accounts. Depending on the system, there may even be user types. So for example, there could be a user type that's like super administrator, and they can add, edit, and delete anything, versus like it's an editor, and so like they can maybe add and edit data, but they can't delete records or files. So depending on the system, there can be different delineations that can be assigned either at the user type level or at the user account level. That said, there can be nuance in terms of how granular the permissions are. They could be as large as the add, edit, delete concept, or they could be as granular as I want this user to only be able to see and edit this part of our collection. The more nuanced and granular it gets, the tougher it is to maintain from like a long-term perspective. But depending on the number of users you have, depending on your use cases, that may make sense for your particular institution. I would say if you are at the shopping part of the CMS, if this is especially important to you, I recommend requesting it as an area that is included in the demo so that you can get a sense of the level of granularity that is offered by that product. Because every product is different and because your needs may be different in terms of what will best service your needs, it's definitely something to request to see. But yes, to some extent, for the most part, if there are any sort of user accounts in the system, there's usually some sort of level of control. The difference is just the granularity. Okay, resources. There are a lot depending on what you need. So this particular book, How to Select, Buy, and Use a Museum Collections Management System, while it is written for the museum folks, It is true of pretty much any collections management system that you may be shopping for. It goes through the procurement process in more detail. Lucidia Press is very kind and offers free e-copies for anybody who attends my webinars. So if that is of interest to you, you can get a free e-copy there. Similarly, we also collaborated and wrote a survivor's guide to museum grant writing. Again, museum in the title. If you are a cultural heritage organization, the museum grant fundamentals will be true and applicable for 99% of you. So if that is of particular help, check that out. Also free e-copy. If you are thinking of grants, and if you not necessarily don't need the book, I would recommend picking up the grants workbook and templates, because in the templates section, I included 4 different type of grant project templates, 2 of which are digital products, and one of those 2 includes like acquisition of collections management system. So if you've never written a grant for helping you go through part of that one-time part of the process, having a look at the template example could be very helpful for you. And for this particular one, again, free copy, because Lucidia is very kind. For the person who asked about the consortia for Northwest Digital Heritage, I collaborated with them last year, which is part of how I know so much about the process, though again, they do an excellent job of putting the process on their website. I partnered with Oregon Parks and Recreation, and we wrote a companion guide specific to like that data preparation and cleanup piece. So even if you're not going through a collections management system migration, but you're interested in data cleanup, this book will be helpful for one or both in terms of getting your data ready, and especially if you're getting your data ready to go into a new system. So it talks about consortia and contribution, but it also talks extensively about that data preparation piece, reviewing and evaluating your data all the way through to different approaches of data cleanup. Webinar resources, depending on where you're going from here. We did a digital collections management fundamentals webinar last month that was really popular. That particular one may be of interest if you are still sort of wondering, is it a collections management system I need, a digital asset management system, and or a preservation management system? So that webinar goes through more of the detail of the differences and overlaps of those systems. Also, earlier this year, we did how to make the case for a better museum CMS, advocacy points, especially if you're needing to lobby to your decision makers that you need a new CMS. If you're interested in that data cleanup piece, we started off the year with some data cleanup, specifically using Excel as our cleanup tool. If you're interested in that open source conversation, we have open to open source. I need to do a follow-up because it's been a couple of years, but I would say probably 90% of the content is still accurate in terms of things to look out for, products to be aware of, that kind of thing. And then we also have the CMS, what's essential, what's hackable, and what does it cost. So especially if you're in sort of a tight spot budget-wise, you need a tool now, and you sort of need to like MacGyver it for at least the next couple of years. That might be a fun one for you to check out. And then if you're interested in digital collection management services that my team offers, of course, you can check out the website. We also have with Lucidia webinars and blog posts we've done on collections management systems. And then all of our webinars end up on the Relicura YouTube channel. And if you are interested in webinars and you're on the newer side, if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get all of the typically once a month news for those if you're interested. So those are there. And that is the end. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a great holiday, and we'll see you in the new year.